How's it going?
Yo, pretty good.
Good.
Ready for a fun podcast?
Oh yeah. I
Awesome.
honestly this one should be interesting to see just what people think about the difference between conservatives and Republicans. But I guess we'll see. I really hope we get a lot of comments coming in about what people think the difference is.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really hoping for some conversation to go on because I think we have a good topic today that everyone can relate to, if not at least just Republicans and Democrats who are aware of it.
Yeah. So, all right. I'll go ahead and get started then. So, welcome to everyone that's listening, live or in the archive. This is the Wake Up America podcast. We're a conservative talk show, and we love people adding comments. So please feel free to add comments, but keep them clean and limit your cussing, or else we will have to mute you. That's just to keep it clean and so that we can reach a wider audience of people.
Yeah,
So
just
our
keep it
topic
civil.
for yeah, and keep it civil. Yeah, we'd prefer to have a dialogue, not a scream fest. So our topic for today is the difference between conservatism and republicanism. And in general, in America, those two ideologies, those two ways of doing things line up. Generally, conservatives are considered to be Republicans and vice versa. But there are differences between the two. And part of that just comes down to what each one is designed to do. Conservatism is much more of an ideology, whereas republicanism is much more of a way of governing. But we're going to just talk about the differences between the two and which one we think is better, and if there's deficiencies in either of them. So that's our topic for today. Feel free to add comments, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right off the bat, I just want to point out that conservatism is an ideology versus, like Spencer said, being Republican or just the Republican Party in general is a way of doing government. Um, and the difference between there is like the difference between being loyal to a form of government or an individual versus being loyal to your morals. Conservatism is just like the general way that people who have certain morals, for instance, me and Spencer, something that's common with conservatives are strong supporters of the Constitution, usually Second Amendment
Right?
supporters, support free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press. Those kind of things are normally aligned with the conservative group of people. And that's those are morals and beliefs, and so that's the difference between being Republican, which is it's the Republican Party. Uh, it's a part of how the government is run, and it's different from what you might believe because a form of government or an individual can change, especially in America when you have a president that gets 4-year terms. So whoever is leading the party is the president, and so the goals and beliefs of the Republican Party can change versus how your beliefs might stay constant. And so that's kind of the difference between conservatives and Republicans, or conservatism versus being Republican.
Yeah, they kind of have different purposes in the way they function and are set up. Being that republicanism is the ideology of having a republic, whether that's a democratic republic like we have here or not, and that's where the root comes from for that word is republic. Republicans or republicanism is a political system that protects liberty and focuses on having laws that can't just be arbitrarily ignored by the government. It's really more of a governmental focused way of thinking. Whereas conservatism is more, as the name implies, the root of that name is conserve. Conservatism is generally a commitment to those traditional values, like the Constitution, like uh, marriages between one man and one woman, and it's that commitment to traditional values, and um, especially aligned within that and those traditional values is political views that favor free enterprise, private ownership, socially traditional ideas like that marriage that I was just talking about. So, conservatism generally aligns with republicanism in terms of what both believe, but their purpose is different. One is much more of an ideology, whereas one is more of a way of governing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect to say right there. Um, and they're yeah, it's versus the way that your beliefs, which can remain consistently constant, versus change, which is something that is more inconsistent. And the reason that we're doing this is because um, there's kind of a confusion on the right, with a lot of conservatives on whether or not if they believe, let's say they believe that a Democratic candidate, obviously not right now, but let's say they believe a Democratic candidate represents their beliefs more accurately. Is it wrong? Is it against their beliefs? Would it be against their beliefs to vote for Democrat? And that's really a matter of what a person believes in. So, to say that if you're a conservative, it's not okay for you to vote Democrat I'm not going to say that because everyone's allowed to vote however they want. That's a beauty of our country. Um, but you do have it's at least especially in the last several years or in recent history, um, Republican Party aligns more with the beliefs of the conservatives than the Democrats do.
Right, but there are a lot of differences between the two, especially now. If you kind of look at the Republican Party over the last couple of decades, it has completely shifted in terms of its overall tone and its overall goals. I think that the Republican Party overall in the past couple of decades has shifted more to the left than it was. Right, the left still thinks that they're crazy for believing some of the things they do, but I think that the Republican Party has given up some of that ground in the name of being tolerant and in the name of accepting everyone. Whereas if it were called the Conservative Party and ran off of conservatism purely instead of being kind of a mix between Republican and conservative, I think they would have stayed more consistent over the past last years. Whereas I think they have really shifted their tone, and especially if we're being honest, we've lost a lot of ground um, in a lot of ways by yielding to the left and that sort of ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have our first message for today, nice and fast. Thank you guys for getting in and getting involved. Go ahead and listen to that real quick.
I just wanted to ask this question because I see that you're talking about conservatism, and you're American. What is your opinion on paleo conservatism? I'm not sure if you've heard that term, but yeah, if you have, I would like to hear your opinion on it.
No, I don't think I've heard that term before. If you could explain a little bit more, that'd be awesome. I'll do a quick look at it and see what it's
Yeah,
about.
I just looked it up. The first thing that popped up from Oxford is a person who advocates older traditional forms of conservatism. And then, as a separate definition, it says an extremely right wing conservative. So I don't know
Yeah,
if,
I'm seeing that.
yeah, I don't know
So
if
you're thinking
that's
like,
more,
are you saying like far right? Is that? I'm guessing that's kind of what he's referencing.
if that's what he's referencing. I wouldn't say that we're like the crazy far right, but I do think that you and me, our ideology is definitely more right than most people.
Yeah,
Generally. Um, But if you're talking about like far right extremists, then I would say we're not in that group.
Yeah, he has a message. Maybe this is him real quick.
I think paleo is more old conservative values, so strict either based on religion. I don't think it means alt right or far right. That's a different.
Yeah, it kind
Okay.
of seems like a mix between that with the extremely right part of the definition, and then also the old and traditional. What do we think about that? I guess that me and Spencer's beliefs kind of align with some of that paleoconservatism. We believe in the Constitution the way that it's been since the Bill of Rights and the Constitution were created. I don't believe in trying to find workarounds for that. Trying to find ways to create more government. I guess that some of our beliefs do align with that, but we're open to. The world's always changing, and so while we do have strict beliefs, there are just some things that change shouldn't touch. That shouldn't be violated. For instance, we don't believe that no matter what the change is, free speech or the right to religion should be violated, or the right to owning a firearm should be violated. Those are just things that should stay as universal constants. And I think that's a common belief in a lot of I guess that's actually a common belief in a lot of conservatives, period, that they believe in, the unchanging value of free speech and, for the First and Second Amendment, they believe in those. So I guess that there might actually be a
Yeah.
considerable portion of the conservative group that is paleo-conservative. Go ahead, Spencer. Sorry about that.
You're fine. I guess in the way you guys are describing it and keeping that traditional view, and like I was talking about earlier of how the party has allowed itself to shift kind of its focus over the past several decades, then in that way I would say yes, that we are paleoconservative. It sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that's why we're open to comments, but it sounds like paleoconservative is not a minor part of the conservative people out there. It sounds like it's a pretty large part, and maybe, quote unquote, regular conservatism is not the majority in that case. And yeah, I guess in the way we're defining it, I would identify as paleo-conservative because there are some things that the Republican Party has shifted on in the last long while that I definitely think we shouldn't have shifted on. And I definitely think we should have stuck on that tradition that we were on before we shifted to this new way of doing it. So we'll go ahead and take one of these messages and then keep responding.
To understand the history of paleoconservatism, you have to go back to the 60s when Trotskyist communists who turned against the USSR after they killed Leon Trotsky. They became Republicans and they became like war hawks. They were very pro-Vietnam War. And they kind of infiltrated the National Review magazine, and they teamed up with neoliberals to also pursue a free market type of economy while maintaining interventionist foreign policy. The paleo-conservatives were brought about by people like Patrick Buchanan, who ran for president against George H.W. Bush, and that talks about more isolationist foreign policy, non-interventionism, not going to war, traditional values, traditional family values, and American nationalism and exceptionalism. Yeah, that's basically what it is in a nutshell.
So, this actually may be where me and Colson differ, and I honestly don't know about this, so we can talk about that. In terms of the American exceptionalism and the traditional family values, absolutely. I think that that is something that I really believe in. And I know that Colson does too. You can go back to one of our past episodes to hear more about that from us. In terms of the isolationist policy and non-intervention, I'm not entirely sure where I stand on that. I think that the goal of America is to spread freedom throughout the world, and sometimes that requires taking up arms and intervening in certain things. The most obvious example of that is World War II, World War I, where freedom was being crushed, and we absolutely had to do something. And in that case, World War II, we were taking a isolationist policy, and Hitler was able to take over a lot of Europe. And then basically, as soon as we said, okay, we're in, the tide of the war changed. And obviously, it didn't change overnight, but it changed. And so I think that America should get involved in wars that really need it, and places that they need to do it. But then another part of me is also thinking that a lot of modern wars, especially, are just ways for politicians to pander, or ways for politicians to say that they're doing something good, whereas I guess the handling of some of these recent wars has not been done the way that I would have done it or liked it done. And it really rides that line right now in some of these modern wars between, are we trying to promote liberty, or are we just sending troops over to die without a real goal? So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. Spencer's got a great point there. The American, exceptionalism and projecting American power. I'm not going to say that America should be the sole leader of the world. We need to conquer the entire world. Right now, let's just go. I'm not saying that, so anyone go saying that I'm some crazy nut wing guy. But I am saying that right now in this world, I do believe that America is the best country and represents the best possibility for the world to have human rights spread across the globe, freedom of speech, stuff like that. That doesn't exist in other countries.
Right.
And as for like getting involved, in foreign conflicts, Spencer's point right there about World War II is great. Without America, World War II would have been a completely different war. There's the famous quote that after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, General Ishikuro Yamamoto said, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with terrible resolve."
Yep.
And Hitler actually shared that same thing, because he realized that America was a country that didn't take crap, especially back, and aligning with more of that timeline of the paleo-conservative ideology, like you said, 60s and stuff like that. And then even before that, I would say, there was a country that was united, that was strong in our resolve and strong in our morals. I think that the modern day America is a country that is a lot different. That's pretty sad in my opinion. But I'd say we shouldn't. We don't deserve to be involved in every single foreign war. But there's a reason that people ask for our help, and it's because we're the best at what we do, because we have the strongest military in the world, and because we don't take crap. We have the war on terrorism. That happened because someone hit us, and so we decided to hit back harder. And I think we've done probably a pretty good job of that. We've taken out Al Qaeda and other large terrorist groups across the world. We're kind of diverting away from the topic a little bit here, so we'll bounce back there in a second when we take another comment. But you've got a good point there. American, foreign interference, that's something that I think really has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. There are just certain things that there's no reason for us to stick our nose in, and there are other things that, this is our business now, or it's been made our business.
And going off that last comment, it's been made our business. As soon as 9/11 happened, and we had the situation where terrorism became so much more real to the American public, that's basically when we launched the war on terror, right? That was the start of the war on terror. And I think that what we've done a lot of good in taking out a lot of terrorists and really squashing them down, especially under President Trump. He did, I think, a fantastic job of taking out these terrorists and really fighting them. And it comes down sometimes to the policy, right? The goals may be good. Take out terrorism because it is bad, obviously. But when it comes to the way of doing that, sometimes I think politicians who think they are military leaders can misstep and do things that are more of a political strategy than a actual military freedom pushing strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Take another comment here.
I think with conservatism, I think the main idea is slow to change. I think yes, how you govern your own life, but then how you govern others. I think there's far more conservatives who are pro gay marriage, for instance, because you shouldn't care how someone else runs their own life. I think that's the difference.
I'd have to say I kind of disagree with that. I know I hang out with people on both sides of the aisle. But I do hang out with more conservatives, and I hang out with people who are less extreme and people who are actually more extreme than me. Me and Spencer are right there on the same level. We pretty much believe the same things as each other. But I have to say that when you say that there's like conservatives who are pro gay marriage, I wouldn't say that there are conservatives who are pro gay marriage because that's why you're
I'm sure
conservative.
there are.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Actually, it was 2 or 3 episodes. I had a person who followed me who was named the gay conservative. So yes, there are conservatives who are pro-gay or LGBTQ. They align more with progressive beliefs, but they maintain conservative values. So there's always people who fit into a smaller outlier or minority. But I'd say the vast majority of conservatives are not what I would call slow to change, but quick to evaluate.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is when for instance, on the left, when you have people who are so progressive that all they want is change. What it is, they just want more progress because more progress has to be better. It doesn't matter what it is, just go. They run at 100 miles an hour and they never stop until they hit a wall. Or they feel like they never hit a wall and then they just keep going right through something, even when they shouldn't. The difference with conservatives is that with our being conservative, you conserve our traditional beliefs, believing in the Constitution, believing in a lot of religious beliefs. You have people who are like, they evaluate what the change is before going into it. For instance, tomorrow's episode, we're going to be talking about on the Equality Act. That's a big thing, and you have a lot of people on the left who are progressive, who are pushing this, and then you have people on the right who are conservative, and they're saying this shouldn't be a part of America. This is undermining beliefs and things like that. And that's a difference, going back into conservative versus Republican, where a Republican, we talk about Republicans. Let's just talk about the politicians because you have the everyday people who are members of the populace who are Republican, and the variance in there is quite vast. But let's just talk about politicians when we talk about that. Being a person who's conservative versus being a Republican politician. Politicians, you have Republicans, you're worried about being reelected back into. But if you had someone who, it doesn't matter what party they went with, as long as they just worked for whatever, they just went with whatever party aligned to their beliefs closest, and then that's the name they ran under, and then ran with their conservative values. That would be different because, like I said, going back to your loyalty to your morals versus loyalty to a group or an individual. Me and Spencer were loyal to America, and we're loyal to whoever supports America in the best way. So, last year and everything, that was President Trump. We support President Trump. We're not big Biden fans.
You could say that.
Yeah, I could say that. So that's the difference. We support America, but we don't say, okay, this is just this is the person who's in office, and so this is who we're just going to constantly believe in, or this is the This is a person running for Republican candidacy, so they must just be the best option. There are Republicans that have run for candidacy that were not the best option. For instance, when it was, go ahead, Spencer.
I was just saying Mitt Romney.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. When he was running for president, we were some of us we were like, oh hey, it's a Republican. He seems to have conservative beliefs. He must not be so bad. And it was versus Obama, so we were kind of like, well, it's him or Obama, so it's got to be better with um, Mitt Romney even at that point. But then when he didn't win, and then as he stayed he was a senator, and then he started voting yes for bills that violated a lot of conservative beliefs and values, a lot of religious beliefs.
Right.
We're looking at that. We're going, yeah, where the morals go? Now you're just playing politician again.
Yeah, he says he's a Christian, and yet he's voting for things that are not Christian value or not backed by Christian values. And I think that's another big difference, is that a conservative, in terms of voting, a conservative will vote for any candidate as long as they think that they promote their conservative values. So if I'm a conservative, which I am, and I saw a Democrat who I look between the Democrat and the Republican, and the Democrat, for whatever reason, is espousing traditional marriage, is talking about gun rights, and all these things that are traditionally conservative, I think I would vote for him. If the Republican in that situation was talking about big government or about taking away your guns. And so our conservative is not bound to the Republican Party. Whereas I think, obviously you can change, but being defined as a Republican, you're generally going to vote for Republicans. And it doesn't matter if all or none of their values match up with you. As long as they're under that party name, you're still going to vote for them.
Absolutely, that's the perfect point. It's about loyalty to beliefs versus loyalty to a group or an individual. We've said that a couple times now. But to make a good comparison here, the Democratic Party is what the Republican Party used to be. Okay, we got back in like 1960s, 1970s. The Democratic Party was the party that was that aligned more with conservative ideals. And unfortunately, back in
I think then both parties were a lot more conservative.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the nation as a whole was more conservative. Yeah, you did have things that, like, okay, for instance, the Democratic Party, they used to be, and sadly, a lot of conservatives used to be more pro-segregation, which is different from nowadays. But that was a conservative belief for a while, and then that's changed now to realizing that segregation and slavery, stuff like that, that's bad. Racism is bad. That violates the First Amendment right of citizens. And so continuing on with that, there's a shift there where the party changed its beliefs, and now Democratic Party is so far left. I mean, it's completely out of the ballpark, all the way left. And then you have the Republican Party, which I wouldn't say they're far right, but they're not left. They're like a little over to the right, but they're not all the way. They're not in the middle of the aisle, and they're not on the left either. You know what I mean? It's kind of like they're that weird. They're a weird space because they have members, and I guess it's true on both parties, but especially prevalent on the Republican Party. You have members who beliefs flip flop from being super conservative, and maybe not far right conservative, but super conservative, to being like middle of the aisle, and so it brings the party to a weird place in terms of how the politicians vote, and the results of which change because of the weird balance that goes on there.
Yeah, and you can look at that. Mitt Romney is that really good example. He will vote on some things that are conservative, and you're like, okay, good job. But then he will almost immediately vote on something that is very far to the left, and you're like, okay, what is going on with this guy? And PragerU actually has a really good graphic, and I don't remember the exact numbers or what video they had it in, but you can search it up. You'll probably be able to find it. It's a graphic that shows the obviously there's been a political divide between the left and right. in our country, and it's been growing. But if you watch their graphic, not only has it grown, but every single ideology on the left and on the right has shifted towards the left. And I think that's where a lot of gap is coming between the conservative and the Republican. Is the conservative is standing where they were, they have the values that they had, and then they're looking and they're seeing that the Republican Party, which they generally support, has shifted away from where they're standing. And they're like, what the heck has happened? Why are they all the way over there? And so I think that's another big difference between conservative and Republican is conservative, if you're a good conservative who believes in what you believe strongly, you will stand where you are no matter what happens. Whereas the Conservative Party has shifted where it was to where it is now.
Absolutely, that's absolutely perfect, Spencer. The beliefs shift, and there's just a change that can follow or cannot follow. We do have another comment, or actually, you have two right here, so real quick.
A lot of the people who hold paleoconservative beliefs are kind of demonised, but one who isn't is John Doyle. Other paleoconservatives, of course, Patrick Buchanan, who was an advisor to Ronald Reagan. Then you have Sam Francis, who was an intellectual, Paul Gottfried, who was an intellectual, and Nick Fuentes, who has a show called America First.
So,
Yeah,
do you know who John Doyle is, Coulson?
Yeah, I watched some of his Hick-Off comedy videos. He's pretty funny.
Yeah, I will say I don't know so much about those other people, but I can speak especially to John Doyle. He is definitely, obviously, a paleo-conservative in terms of what he believes, and actually, watching his videos has kind of woken me up. As our name implies, Wake Up America. It's woken me up to the reality of our situation, and a lot of what he says has made me realize, why does the Republican Party believe this? Why does the Republican Party do this when even a decade ago that would have been an unthinkable thing? I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but there are just so many things that have shifted, and I think he is definitely a paleo-conservative, and he offers a lot of interesting perspectives on what's happening right now in America.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've in his Hick-Off comedy, he's got that black and white, like 60s family kind of thing that he plays around with, and I think that's kind of funny. Yeah, and there's just people like that, and I really enjoy watching some of his videos because he makes good points and he backs it up with fact. And I say that is something that is also a difference between conservative party versus Republican and the left, is that a matter of evidence and facts. On the left, facts is a relative term. On the right, with conservatives, that is a very strict term. And I'd say that in the Republican Party and Democratic Party, it's really Republicans versus everybody else. Republican Party, facts depend on what gets, for what gets votes, right? What gets votes, or for voters, it is what the people are saying. And I hate I guess I can't say I hate, but I dislike it when people strongly dislike. Yeah, I guess I do hate it. When people align their beliefs and they just strictly say, like you have people who are generational Democrats or generational Republicans, where their parents believe it, maybe their grandparents believed it, so they just also believe it too, and they just vote and they don't really think about it. And that's a sad thing that happens, where you have people who don't seek the truth. The truth is not ingrained in the Republican Party. The truth is something that you have to seek after. I'd say that in pretty much every instance, within maybe a select few that I can't really think of off the top of my head, but there are probably some. The truth is something that aligns more with the conservative belief ideology. Where you have people who believe in the Constitution, and that's where the facts come from. You have people who study and make sure they know what they're talking about before they get into a debate. Like me and Spencer, we are constantly being aware of all the different news, watching the right, people who are conservative news, watching the left news, watching stuff. We're always taking in the facts and information, so we have information from both sides, and that's something that you get more on conservatives. In the Republican Party, it's more so about votes and less so about values. They care more about the politicians care more about pushing for their next vote. What's going to get them what's going to get them results? What's going to help get them reelected? And especially with career politicians who have been doing this for been in government for many years and have considerable power. They push more for what's going to get them reelected. And you have people who believe that what's going to get them reelected is no longer what maybe they ran on for their campaign, or no longer aligns at all maybe with the conservative values. Mitt Romney, Mitch McConnell, those are good examples. And there's several other Republicans, like during President Donald Trump's second impeachment trial, where they became, as we affectionately refer to as turncoats, and they shifted their beliefs into a different pattern than they shifted their beliefs into a different pattern than when everybody else believed, and we're like, hey, that's not right. We've always seen you as this, and now you're going this way. That's just not right. And they say it's for things like, I can't morally accept that President Donald Trump incited violence in the Capitol Hill riots, and that he's not going to be impeached, so I have to vote to impeach him. But those are career politicians. They care about getting reelected. And
Right.
that's something that is relative. It matters to them, unless they are someone who is of exceptional moral character, who isn't concerned about being reelected, but they might still be a career politician, and they're more so concerned about following their beliefs and what they promised in their campaigns or whatever. And they're less so concerned about what's going to get me reelected so I can get back in here. Those are people that are very, very few and far between. And I would say that in government are people that are consistently weeded out and traded out for people who are more relative, which to me, I don't understand. Yeah, go ahead, Spencer.
And that's what we need to do is, as conservatives, we need to hold these people responsible. We need to, right, Mitt Romney, I can't believe people keep voting him into office. He's been a turncoat. He's been so non-conservative Republican for so long, he might as well be a Democrat. And that's what we need to do as conservatives. We need to vote out the people that are betraying our values, right? Conservatism is more about values than republicanism is. Both are about values, but the conservative is based on his or her values. And that's what conservatives need to do, is they need to vote out all of these politicians that have betrayed their values and their traditions, and so that way we can send that signal to those politicians that says, "Hey, we're not going to deal with this crap, or else you're going to be voted out of power. Which we know you really love your power, so you better do what we want." And that's really, I think, the only way that we can hold the politicians responsible at this point is just to get their attention somehow and say, look, you have to stand up for what we believe, or we're not going to give you any more power ever again.
Absolutely, yep. Spencer makes great points there. It's you got to focus on your beliefs and make sure that what the people are saying is what you believe, and don't just give power, because when you give your vote to someone, you're giving them power. That's what it is, because that's what it is in this country. You vote for someone that gets them back into office, that gives them power to influence again. So don't give your vote out blindly, especially if you don't know if it's a person that's going to follow your beliefs and do what you think is right. And if you don't believe that that person is the best option and doesn't represent you the best, then don't vote for them. Be open-minded about who the candidates are, so you can choose who is the best option.
Yeah.
Another message here. Go ahead, Spencer, real quick.
Just for those that are watching, talking about that message, we love messages. We're glad that you guys are sharing, and feel free to share and make sure you get this message out to other people.
Yep, absolutely. Listen to this message real quick.
What I learned in university is that the term conservative actually has a definition, and conservatives want government intervention in social aspects of life and do not want government intervention into economic life, whereas liberals want government intervention in economic life but don't want government intervention in social life.
Okay, real quick, Dragonborn. I'm not gonna. Don't take this as an insult right here, but what you hear in college and university about conservative and liberal, don't believe a word of it. Like absolutely none of it. Um, Colleges and universities have been, especially aligned towards the left, and they've been preaching a lot of biased and false ideologies into the curriculum for many years now. Saying things that you would look at and you can find evidence against what they're saying, but they still say it, and they're not telling you the truth. So make sure you do your own research there.
I
Conservatives
think he does
believe,
have good points, though.
yeah, I would say conservatives don't believe in social intervention, and they definitely don't believe in economic. They believe in as little government intervention as possible. The only social intervention I would say that conservatives believe in is just the government upholding their right to First Amendment, Second Amendment, the Constitution, upholding those rights, but no more than that. We don't want more laws being passed to do this or that. We just want people to leave those things alone and allow us to practice and believe, with our human rights that have been guaranteed to us by the Constitution. So I would say that instead of the conservatives wanting government intervention socially instead of economically, conservatives just don't want government intervention at all. They want it as little as possible.
I
Liberals are the opposite.
I think the way I kind of look at it, the left, not liberals, but the left, wants government intervention in everything, right? Because if they can get their hands in everything, then they will have power over everything. So I think the left wants government intervention and power in absolutely everything, social, economic, etc. I think the liberal generally has the I don't know if I'm using this term right, laissez-faire, the I do what you want, you leave me alone type of way of looking at things. So I think liberals in general say that the government shouldn't be involved in social stuff, and they should be involved minimally in economic stuff. Whereas I think the conservative view is that government should be involved minimally in absolutely everything, economic and social, because I think in general, the conservative view is that people can govern themselves better than someone far off in the capital can govern them. And if you take that ideology and put it into government intervention, it becomes that the government should only intervene and do a minimum amount of work in each field, whether that is social, where the government has the original, I believe it was the Equality Act, the Equal Pay Act, where everyone gets paid equally, right? That was a good thing. But generally, past that, the conservative says they shouldn't involve themselves in marriage. That should be up to churches and people that want to get a civil union. And in terms of economics, the conservative says that I want the government to be involved enough that no one gets terribly hurt, but the government should not be regulating every single thing. So I see it as kind of three different ways of looking at things. The Republican, I guess four ways. The Republican is more of a government should be involved in social stuff, but I think those are the four different categories, and you can't necessarily combine both of them, even if one ideology votes for a specific party and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. The ideologies, um, conservative conservative is really just what it says. You believe in conserving traditional values. It's when people say it's anti-change, we're not anti-change. We're just strict about what kind of change we accept because, like I said earlier, when you're on with the left and they constantly just accept change and they say anyone who doesn't accept change must just be a hater or yada yada yada. And that's not true. With conservatives, you just have people who are more aware of change. Let's for instance, for me and Spencer, at least, I'm not sure if it's true of every conservative. We're aware of change because we've studied history and we realize that accepting every change that just comes by you is a poor way of living your life, and it's a great way for everything you believe in to get destroyed. You have things like throughout history, people just accepting change for whatever reason or pushing change, and the results of which sometimes result in their nation falling. Like you have with the Roman Empire. The vast majority of the public was kind of indifferent or pushed for support of whatever. They were. It was a weird time where they kind of just upheaval was common, and it was always this is new, push for this, go for that. And that's a trend that we're starting to see in the U.S. That's kind of scary because you have people who are like, this is the new thing, this is what you need to support. You don't support, then you're a bigot or you're a hater, whatever it may be. And that's something that is unacceptable to conservatives. That differs on a fundamental level against Republicans because being, a political party, they have to accept change and live with it and, not, speak against it, or maybe they can find it as it goes through, but afterwards there's nothing they can do about it until it comes back into another vote. And I guess that's not entirely true, but, just take that with a grain of salt. You have we've said it before, and I feel like I might be repeating myself because I'm kind of feel like I'm beating the dead horse here. But it's a matter of loyalty to values versus loyalty to a group. A group's values can change, especially a group that's long-standing and votes and bases its values off of the values of a group of voters. That can change, and what they want in terms of getting reelected can change, yada yada yada. The reasons like this result in something that's like standing. Here you go. Here's a good analogy. The wise man built his house upon the rock. For those of you who don't know that, that's a Christian reference. The wise man built his house upon the rock. In this term, the wise man would be the people who follow with their values and maintain beliefs in their values and vote off their values instead of voting off a group or an individual. And then the foolish man built his house upon the sand is a group that throws their support to the wind with whatever, just sticking with one thing, not being open, not being aware. And that's actually that one analogy can be made in several different instances, and I probably actually bring that up because I haven't thought about that before.
Yeah.
So that will probably be back up in later episodes.
And one way of using that example is the rock is those values. If you base your values on a traditional set of values that is a rock, it doesn't change. But if you do that, then your house is going to be sturdy. But if you build your house on that proverbial sand, on the changing opinions of a party or the changing opinions of the crowd, then you're going to shift, right? Sand shifts, and as soon as you shift, you may not notice a little bit of shifting, but if there's a flood or something, then all of a sudden you've been shifted miles and you don't even realize it. So yeah, that's actually a really good analogy. I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, it's important to keep in mind that things change, and that's something that I'm not saying that conservatives need to be against change, because change is part of the world. Change is part of nature. It's part of how everything works. And like I said before, change is okay as long as it's not change that violates beliefs. Um, when you have the left whose values just change based on, commonly you have with being just, sheepled by whatever, authority or person in the government, or a celebrity icon, or a news organization or something like that. Did they just push an ideology and everyone just hops on the bandwagon and says, okay, let's just go with that? That's change. That's quote unquote moving forward. So let's just hop on that bandwagon and see where it takes us. That is a very risky prospect. Something that can lead to disaster, where people just they aren't aware, and they don't make themselves aware of the consequences of a choice. And that's similar. That's not that right there ties right in for the Republican Party. When you have people who are not aware of what they're voting for, people who are not aware of who they're supporting, and they don't do the research, they don't follow their beliefs, they follow a group. Then you have people who don't. Well, actually, when you have people who don't follow their beliefs, they follow a group. You have people who have unsturdy beliefs, because obviously their beliefs are aligning with whoever is, whatever this group is, what my beliefs are. That's like letting go of the reins and hoping that the horse will take you the direction you want. That's
Yeah,
it.
you
Just
got a
doesn't
guy.
make sense. Yeah, you got to guide the horse, and so you having strong morals is you having your hands on the reins, taking control of the horse, taking control of your life. Things, following what beliefs you want, following the path. When you just say, I think that Republican Party aligns with my beliefs closest, whatever point in your life, you're going to say this, and then you just say, I'm going to be a Republican forever, or I'm going to be a Republican for now at least. Then you're saying, I'm going to take my hands off the reins, and I'm going to hope that whoever I'm voting for, Republican, is just a person that is of moral fiber, that believes what I believe and will support what I support and represent me the best.
Yeah, you're asking the horse to, okay, um I want to go to my grandma's house, and you're hoping that the horse knows the way there and knows that you want to go there without telling the horse, without steering the horse in that direction. And that's actually why I personally advocate for being conservative over being Republican, right? If you are conservative, then you have that baseline value. You have those things that you believe, and those won't change unless your belief in them change, but those values won't change. And then now that you've set that foundation of, okay, I'm conservative and this is what I believe, then you can look and see which party and which candidates are supporting what you believe. And if you have that baseline, then you are able to move forward. But without that baseline, if you just say, well, the Republican Party seems good enough, every Republican candidate seems good enough, then yeah, the horse could be driving you off a cliff before you realize, and can turn back.
Yeah, absolutely. That's completely it. It's taking your hands out of the rein and letting things just go where they're going to do. I think it's a good time for a comment right now. So go ahead and.
Yeah, my uni professor is a little liberal. Gotta take a few things with salt from him, I guess. But one thing that he does talk about, and I actually have supported before his class even, is congressional term limits. And I'm curious what you guys have to say about
Absolutely.
Ted Cruz proposing congressional term limits of 2 terms for senators of 6 years and 3 terms of 2 years for members of the House. What are your thoughts?
Okay, let's go on to this, because I love this topic, mainly because I 100% support them. And there's a reason I do. The counter argument generally to term limits is, well, if there's a really good politician, then he or she won't be able to do as much good because they'll be limited. Okay, we only elect a president for 8 years. That would be less time or equal time to those term limits you just proposed. And I also think that generally there shouldn't, whether it's an age gap or not, there should be a cognitive ability limit, I guess, to disqualify people like former Vice President Joe Biden, who you can obviously see has signs of dementia. And right, we don't want someone who can't function their brain can't work properly to lead the government. So I'm personally in favor of term limits. Obviously, some stuff would need to be worked out with them, but I think they're a great thing.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I think term limits are something that reinforces the ability for people not to run as career politicians, and it removes a lot of filth that you see in government where people just keep getting voted and voted and voted, and they only care about getting revoted. They only care about maintaining their power. You have, horrible people like Pelosi and Schumer, and I'd say that some of the more mainstream career politicians on the right are not as bad, but they definitely are not perfect. You have Ted Cruz. I like the guy. But you have others who are kind of like, yeah, no, like Romney and Mitch McConnell. Yeah, those are career politicians that obviously have strayed away from the path. And I think that's an important distinction. But I do completely agree with term limits, absolutely. And if you ask me, the entire idea of having people who just are career politicians that can get elected as many times as they want into powerful positions in our government is something that fundamentally undermines democracy, just on a fundamental scale. There's no way that you can have good democracy when people can get in as many times they want, despite whether or not they're actually doing anything. Like Obama, he went through the legislative in Illinois, right? Yeah, Illinois, and he did absolutely nothing. He voted present to all of the votes. He never voted yay or nay. He was present every single time. He was a career politician. When he ran for president, he was just as worthless. He did absolutely nothing. People who don't agree with me, put your comments. I'm happy to debate that.
And I think another benefit of having term limits is that it really opens up the field for people, because you look, Mitch McConnell, Schumer, Pelosi, all these and a bunch of other ones have been in there for decades, right? Former Vice President Joe Biden was in there for, I believe, 47 years. And whether you think he did anything good or not, he was still in there for 5 decades. The world changes so much in 5 decades. And I think that imposing term limits, going back to our point of today, would allow more people to run that normally wouldn't run, because I think a lot of people that are the best people to run our government don't run. And part of that is because they look and they see that they have to go up against this career politician who has been in power for decades. And they say, well, there's no way I'm going to win against that, so I might as well not waste my money or my time or my stress. And if you have a way of limiting the time that each person serves, then those people look and they say, well, this person can't run again next year, and I've been garnering some support, I'm going to run. And I think that would actually be one of the ways to get the party back on track, is to have people run as conservatives, traditional conservatives, rather than just Republican career politicians, because every career politician is corrupt in some amount, right? It may just be a little bit, or it may be a ton, like Pelosi and them. But I think if you had term limits, then you would be able to limit the power of those people and be able to get new voices in who can be more conservative than the Republicans that are currently in office.
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, having the ability to limit people that could have corrupt, what was I going to say there? I don't want to say corrupt beliefs, corrupt goals. Or just corrupt people really in general. People who push for themselves instead of push for the government. Push for themselves instead of push for, the government. Push for themselves instead of push for America as a whole, are people who undermine, they undermine democracy. That's that tying back in right to our point, and at a pretty good time, I must say. Having people who push for themselves undermines conservative beliefs on a core level, because we believe in democracy and we believe in these traditional ideals that have been upheld by by conservatives across the country for a long time. And having people in the Republican Party and also having people in the Democratic Party, people on both sides who work for themselves instead of working for the nation or for a value set. Those are people that really just we don't need them in there, and so if they should get in there, I want to limit them being in there as long as absolutely possible.
Yeah. And we can go ahead and take this next message.
Yep.
Ted Cruz is pretty much a textbook example of a career politician.
Yeah, he is, but the difference is, between like Pelosi and Cruz is that Cruz runs by a set of morals. He has morality, which is something that I cannot say for Pelosi. Her values shift and change, and she's just a slithery little snake, if you ask me. She's not searching for the betterment of the country. She's searching for the betterment of herself. She's searching to get reelected to make more money, because she's corrupt as can possibly be. Whether or not she's a straight up communist is something that we could probably debate. But she's definitely not a good person to be in our government. And you have people like Mitch McConnell, career politician, corrupt. Obviously, he does not follow the Republican value line anymore, but he still has Republican votes. Because because he has the title Republican on his name, you have people who are loyal to the party who don't realize that he is not a good person to represent the party, and yet he's still in there, and he's no longer the majority leader now because Democrats have majority, but still not a good person to be in.
Yeah, and I will say, as before I really got involved in politics, and I think this is actually the way that a lot of people work, because there are people like me and Colson where we are really involved in politics, and it's not our life, but we pay a lot of attention to it, and we know how much it affects us. Whereas I think a lot of people just go about life, and when an election comes, they say, well, I believe in conservative values, so I'm going to vote Republican. And I think that is another thing, is that people need to look at things and actually study it out, because if you pay attention, then you're going to realize that Republican that you're voting for doesn't believe what you believe. Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney, they have that R next to their name, and until people wake up and realize that R is not important, their values are what are important, then they're still going to get reelected, because the conservatives, that they're not necessarily lazy, but they just don't care enough to do their research, say, well, he's Republican, so he must be what I want. And so I think that's something that people need to wake up to, is just because there's an R next to their name does not mean that they are automatically conservative or automatically have all the values that you want them to have.
Absolutely. We have 2 comments here, and we need to be finishing up for the day. So we'll go ahead and get those real quick.
There's really old footage when she was younger of Nancy Pelosi talking up the idea of a universal or single-payer healthcare system. in the US. There's actual footage of that from years ago. And she, since then, has obviously abandoned that particular position. So wouldn't that make her someone who has changed for the better in your view?
I would say that's a change for the better. By the way, thank you for keeping your comment respectful, and we really appreciate comments that don't have a bunch of cussing in them. We're loving the comments today that are like that. So, yeah, I think that's a change for the better, and I'll kind of let you handle that one, Colson.
Yeah, I say that's a change for the better. Definitely, she's not perfect right now. I'd say nobody's perfect, but she's just worse than most. Career politicians, and really, there you can have good people, you can have bad people, but career politicians as a whole, I believe, should not be in there. And I really appreciate what Senator Ted Cruz is trying to do. Even though he's a career politician, he's not bad, but he's pushing a bill that would make it so he actually can't maintain a job like that anymore because he can't be a career politician under a bill that he's proposing. So that's a sacrifice he's making on his own to better the country. And that's the difference that you have. That's him working off a set of morals, which I would say are conservative morals, versus working off of a value to being Republican, which is just being reelected, working off of that kind of platform right there.
Yep, we'll take the next message.
Yep, go ahead.
You're absolutely correct. That R is not important, nor is that D. I feel L is more important, or I is more important than those other two letters.
So I think you're referencing libertarian or independent. And I would agree that the ideology between those or behind those are more important, but I still think the party L or the party I, any party symbol is still not important unless who's running under that party is supporting the values that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. You really got to make sure that the people you're voting for and the people you're going to be loyal to are the people that are going to be having your best interests in mind. Simple fact of the matter is that Republicans and people who follow strict party lines do not have that. It's a matter of self-interest versus a matter of morality. So that's really there is all to say about that. We have one more comment. You want to take that real quick, Spencer, before we go?
Yep, no problem.
Okay.
Oh, I just missed the show. I just got here and you guys are just ending. That's shitty.
Yeah, well, feel free to go back and watch our other shows. We have a lot of topics that we have covered and that we are going to cover.
Yep, and tomorrow is going to be a really good episode. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. So tomorrow is going to be a 2-hour, and it could actually be more, but probably 2 hours. We'll just see how tomorrow goes. But tomorrow is going to be a lot of fun. We're talking about the Equality Act tomorrow and the effects that can have. Pretty serious topic. So yeah, definitely tune in tomorrow, guys. I think tomorrow is going to be very, very interesting, very lively. I'm hoping that we'll have a pretty good crowd. Lots of debate around that one tomorrow.
Yeah, I think if we get like we had today with a lot of people adding some really good, insightful comments, then tomorrow's show will be great. So make sure to check back here tomorrow for that show.
Yeah, absolutely. Please tune in, guys. I think we can have a lot of fun tomorrow. But for today, yeah, we're over time. We're gonna have to wrap it up, guys. So thank you everyone for coming today. We've had a really fun day. Thank you for your comments, your replies, keeping it clean and civil. Yeah, I think today's been a lot of fun, Spencer.
Yeah, this has been great. I really enjoyed all the great comments, and I hope that you guys can join us tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Colson.
My name is Spencer. We're 18 and American.
I'm signing off. Everyone, thank you for coming today. We'll see you guys later.